What is up, fellas, and welcome to another episode of Rewriting History with me, the Goob. And today I am joined by Vincent Barrows, Ricardo Calvario, and Occam's Razor. And we're going to be discussing Mount Pisgah. But before we get into all of the details, Vincent, do you want to give a little bit of background about yourself and how long you've been working on this topic here?
Yes, I'm glad to be here and to share about the topic of Mount Pisgah. I've been researching this since around 2003 when I started volunteering at the Cahokia Mounds. And as an avocational archaeologist, my interest in the symbolism of engravings and sculptures started when I was volunteering at Cahokia and led me into research about this site from Mount Pisgah, North Carolina, which had similar symbolism and cross-hatching on tablets and engraved figurines that were very similar to the Cahokia Mounds figurines. And so I've been researching this and reading everything I can about it. Had the opportunity to visit the museum and view the actual collection, which is no longer on display. It was taken off display in about 2009, and it has been in a storage locker since then. So unfortunately, this collection of important artifacts that we'll learn about is not on display currently. So it's kind of a mystery, and I've always been interested in learning about the mysteries of the past. And so this is one of the ones I'm glad to have a chance to share about.
Okay. Well, Ricardo, if you have anything to add before we get started, feel free. But if not, I'm going to let you go ahead and dive on into your presentation here. So here we go.
Okay. So I'll start from the beginning. What we're talking about here is the Mount Pisgah site in North Carolina. This is a site in Haywood County, and it was first shown here. It's in North Carolina. Here's the coordinates, and I can open up a Google Earth view to kind of show the overall location. If I can share this tab here just a second.
Yeah, I always struggle getting the right tab to display. It can be confusing, and I use StreamYard regularly.
Can you see that?
Yeah, let me put it on the stage for you. There you go.
Okay, so this is the Garden Creek Archaeological Site, and so it's located in the western part of North Carolina. So I'm kind of zooming out to show where it's at compared to all the eastern states. And so it's right in the Cherokee homeland, North Carolina here, there's Tennessee, Ohio, Indiana. And this site happened to be a very important site central to the Hopewell and even later Adena and Mississippian cultures. And then the Cherokee were part of the site as an important inhabitant, and they had a lot of villages and cities in the site. It was heavily contested even from the 1500s when DeSoto arrived, and all through the 1600s and 1700s. The site was part of the Cherokee land, and the village that the Cherokee lived in was here. You can see the names are important, like Morningstar, Canton, West Canton, and Asheville.
So this site has been an important native site going all the way back, like at least 2,000 years, all the way into the 1500s, 1600s.
Right. And it was, even as we will see later on in the presentation, that the site has ancient remains that were found there. So it was reused from at least 8,000 BC all the way through the time European occupation arrived.
So it goes way back.
Yes.
Gotcha.
And so I'll try to then share the presentation again.
All right. There you go.
Okay, so can everyone see that?
Should be, yep.
Okay. So this next slide shows the map that James Mooney made in 1880. That's a USGS map. He circled the two mounds that were going to be looking at. These are indicated here in the red circle with little triangles. They're called the Garden Creek site. And
so I'm not sure if what slide are you? Can you change slides for me?
Okay. Sorry, a little technical difficulties.
I'm just not. It seems
3. Okay, so there we go. Slide 3.
Yeah, there we go. All right.
All right.
I was just making sure it was working.
Sorry, there. Okay, so there we go. Now we've got the USGS map shown with the 2 mounds, the Garden Creek mounds in Haywood County, and you can see here where they were located. Later, when Geoffrey Coe did excavations here from around 1965 up to about 1983, these are some of the results from his excavations. And he found these were middle woodland and Mississippian components of Garden Creek. These 2 mounds in particular are the ones that we'll be focusing on, mound number 1 and mound number 2 here.
And middle woodland is what time period?
That's around 200 AD up to about 800 AD. And then Mississippian from 800 up to about 1450 AD.
Gotcha.
And this next slide shows the picture of the excavation crew, and this is colorized to show the excavation crew as they walked across the field. And at that time, the field had been plowed for about 50 years already, but they had found a lot of cultural remains, pottery shards, and even historical remains that were abundant in this field. I mean, they were covering the field. And even when the High Foundation came by, he discovered a lot of cultural remains throughout the field, just in great abundance, scattered throughout this plow zone. And so this slide shows the colorized version of the excavation crew as well. And the person in the center is probably James Mooney holding the map, and then Man Valentine next to him with the beard. That was the owner of the Valentine Museum. This next slide shows a picture of the rock art at the site. And so there were, in fact, rock art displays or panels at the site next to Mount Pisgah. And this slide shows a picture of a skeleton in the center at the bottom and the mound that had been excavated, Mount Pisgah. And on the upper right corner, you see a wooden box or possibly a casket that this site was known to have skeletons in wooden caskets, wooden boxes found there.
And that's not typically associated with Native American burials?
Not typically. It's unusual. You don't usually hear about that, but it was described in the DeSoto Chronicles that they found wooden caskets in the funerary remains of the village of Kofitacheke.
And DeSoto, just I like to establish, the time of everything. So DeSoto was one of the very first explorers, and he was doing this in like 1540, right? He was pretty much the first person European to be encountering these people.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that's important. If we could identify what the race of the skeleton is here, and also the significance of this wooden box up here, this mound looks like it has a lot of charcoal ashes and layers of charcoal that were throughout the structure, and it was excavated later to be determined as a earth lodge, and it had a dual chambered earth lodge that was aligned north and south. The 2 chambers connected with a subterranean passageway between them, and this was so the charcoal is important because it shows that the building was burnt down, and that coincides with a lot of the evidence of the DeSoto expedition burning down the buildings, as well as even later expeditions from the Cherokee with the buildings being burnt down. So this is a depiction of the actual excavation from Geoffrey Coe, and it shows the orientation of the 2 twin earth lodges that were dug up here. And so again, this was around 1965 up to about 1980 when they did this excavation. So a lot later, after the original Valentine cache had been found, what Valentine did is he tunneled into this mound from the top in the center, and he dug up this big cache of artifacts. And then later on, Geoffrey Coe and the excavators discovered this twin Earth Lodge mound. And this is an important picture because it shows there was mound fill buried here in the mound, and these basket load evidence of the mound, as well as the excavation that Valentine and the crew had dug into the mound, into the central portion of the Earth Lodge.
Right.
So the view from the field, this is what it looks like in 1963, and an aerial photo in 1965 showing the mounds. And so at that time, they were just plowed down and barely visible.
Yeah, you can barely tell where they're at there.
But the evidence of the pit into the center of the mound was still there from where the Valentines had dug into the central Earth Lodge chambers in both Mound 1 and 2. And so this is a block diagram showing the stages of construction and the later excavation discoveries. And so they came back and they took pictures of the excavation and cleaned it, and they showed where there were post pits, and they put these white plates on top of the post pits to show where originally the buildings were located. So what we're looking at really is the bottom layer of the mound after it was excavated. And so subsequent buildings had been constructed on top of this through time, and they just excavated down to the very base of the mound.
Right. So that what the base that you're showing there, you believe, is the structure that was burnt by DeSoto, and then they continued to build on top of that over time.
No, I mean this. I think this predated DeSoto, so this was like even 2,000 years ago or more when they first started building it. And then by the time DeSoto was there, it would have been built on top of. And so what we're seeing at it here is down at the first stages of construction, the earliest time that it was occupied.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so the focus of this is really to look at what was found there in 1879, 1881, when the Valentines were digging into this mound, and they excavated 2,500 stone and pottery objects from the central mound. And then subsequently, the 148 years after that, when they discovered these, this is the largest cache of artifacts in Eastern North America.
Wow, and the largest cache, okay.
It is, and they're unique and important. We have the first dates now from the cache. They've been tested, and we found that they're authentic as well. And the date of this was determined by thermoluminescence at Oxford Authentication. We reached out to we worked with the Valentine Museum where these objects were curated. We sent off 10 examples from the cache, and we did laser scanning on the actual artifacts. Some of them were banner stones. So like this example is a picture of a banner stone. It's called a lunar crescent banner stone, which is one of those problematic artifacts that this banner stone was in the cache. And many of you may know the banner stones are archaic artifacts. Some people associate them with alitals or spear throwers, but this one in particular found in the mound is probably one of the earliest, most likely one of the earliest artifacts, because they're often associated with the early archaic time frame, around 8,000 to 5,000 BC. So the fact that it's present in the collection is evidence of a very early form of artifact. And I have here some links to the artifacts that are shown in 3D, and we could look at those. But what I'd like to do is for Occam to show his video, because we went to the Mound site at Valentine Museum, and Occam videotaped the artifacts that were on display. And so I asked him to put together a short video to see if he could display those.
Okay. Well, that's great, Vince. Thank you. So nice. The email is coming any minute from the editor. So if you could go back to the presentation, and I will, can I email it to you, Goob, when I get it? Is that all right?
Yeah, or you should be able to also do the same thing that Vincent is doing. You just click the present button and you should be able to show your screen.
Present button on the bottom?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, we'll see. Okay, but shortly, just a few minutes, Vince, I promise. Just
Okay.
start it up and we'll be back.
All right, so that's fine. So we'll see those, and I could show the links if you want to. I could while we're waiting on it, I could go through that and show the 3D links.
Sure, and I can include those in the description after this ends if you'd like, if you send those to me.
Okay.
Vincent, if I may, just a question for you. Any of the baskets were tested? Because it's organic material. That's why my question. Are them still in storage? They disappeared? What do we know about the baskets?
We didn't test any of those. We tested some pottery bowls and some pottery pipes.
Okay, so right now we've covered, a nice little history of this mound, these mounds, and we've established that they have a very, very long history. What is it that's so significant about these mounds? Why are these discoveries so important? What implications do they hold?
And so part of the importance is determining the history, the connection to DeSoto, possibly the Cherokee connection as well, the history of the site. The things that were found that we know include sheet copper. They found silver, mica, shell and bone beads. They found bear teeth and even bone pins. There were quartz plummets, incised bone tablets, cut mica fragments, and charcoal large stone weights, and the 2,500 or so pottery and soapstone specimens as well. So there's a large, massive collection here. This was targeted as initially a site that was part of the mound builder myth. So when the Smithsonian first heard about it, one of the key issues is James Emmert and James Mooney from the Smithsonian set out to refute the mound builder myth. And they said, oh, they can't be real. They thought that someone must have planted those and that these were like a hoax or a imposition against Valentine to try to make it seem like someone planted them before he was there. But then they stated that said they found somebody that said they made them and put them for sale to the Valentines. So the issue is they tried to.
So this is all fake, according, at least originally, the opinion of the experts was that this is all a big hoax.
Right. They said, oh, that can't be real. They couldn't have possibly found all those. They said it's a hoax or a fake. And the fact that then they put them in a vault for almost 150 years after that. The Valentine, Museum didn't display them, and they were created in the vault and stored away. So the Smithsonian curator called Charles Rao at the time said, well, that can't be real. But the new evidence now shows that, in fact, they are real, because in order to get a date from thermoluminescence, it has to be pottery. And when Smithsonian curator Rao looked at them, he said that they were all potstone or soapstone. And soapstone can't be thermoluminescence dated. So the fact that we have a date, a chronological date from thermoluminescence is proof alone that they're not soapstone and that they're actually artifacts. The dates came back showing they're at least from 1780. So the issue is this is probably because they were reset when the Cherokee's buildings were burnt down.
Right.
The thermoluminescence would determine the last heating episode. So even though the artifacts could be predating 1780, well, that was when they had fires in the buildings and their buildings were burnt down from the Cherokee village that lived there.
Right. So the way that I believe you explained thermoluminescence dating on objects like pottery is that they drill into the pottery, take an internal sample, and do whatever methods they do, and that allows them to determine, like you said, the last time that was fired, which usually means when the pottery is created. But if they were in a big fire when the building burnt down, that could reset that to that date rather than its original creation.
Right.
Yeah.
But sorry for keeping on this point. But if the baskets were found in the same layer, wouldn't it be better to test the baskets to prove the age of the artifacts of that layer?
Yes, well, and in fact, the baskets in the mound itself was dated subsequently by the archaeologists, and they determined it had origins in the Mississippian and the Pisgah phase, and it actually became known as the Pisgah phase because of the site at Mount Pisgah, and that was from 1000 to 1450 AD. And then previously there was also an earlier occupation at the site, which was a woodland occupation from around 200 to 500 AD.
And how about the banner stones? The fact that they are archaic wouldn't what do they say about them? Is that an artifact that was passed on from generation to generation, or does it add to the age of the site itself?
Right. So the banner stones and the symbolism and the time frame of those are known to be archaic. So they're even predating that. So, I mean, there's good evidence that the site was used. And in fact, the sign on the site says it was from 8000 BC all the way up to European occupation. So it was a continuously occupied site with many village components living there for many thousands of years.
But in what layer was the banner stone found?
And that was in the cache, the central cache that Valentine excavated out of the center of the mound.
And they didn't use it to date the site?
No. They misidentified it. In fact, they thought it was a figurine. They didn't even know it was a banner stone.
Okay.
Because they didn't know back then what banner stones were. And in fact, when it was found, it was before banner stones were actually studied. And it had literally been sitting in the vault with all the other artifacts for almost 150 years.
You know, that's a very common theme that I find amongst these hoaxes, is that quite frequently these hoaxes are discovering things that haven't even been discovered yet. Like you just said, that banner stone wasn't even known at the time. They didn't know about banner stones yet, but this is a hoax. They're faking these artifacts that we don't even know about before we know about them. That's a very common theme I find amongst these stories.
Yeah, but they didn't use them to redate them after they know what they are. And that's my point. Now that you know what they are, what are the implications of that finding in that layer in conjunction with the other things that were found on that layer? And because they don't want to date the other things that were found on that layer, that banner stone is just excluded from the equation as an anomaly that just happened to be there. Is that their position, Vincent?
Right. Well, they didn't even comment on the fact that it was a banner stone. They just did not know, and it was something that they wouldn't even comment on.
And is there any other reason why they might be encouraged to label these as a hoax? Was there something anomalous besides, just the age of these artifacts? These figurines, did they show anything that was out of place? Or?
Well, I think part of it is the issue with Nagpra, and I mean the fact that these were associated with the mound and it was culturally significant, that they've called them either folk art or hoaxes. And the current position of the museum is that these are either folk art or hoaxes. And so in order to have a hoax, you have to have someone who hoaxed it. They haven't identified any hoaxer or fake fraudulent activity. They've just said that's their viewpoint. And but to have folk art, well, folk art means it has to be something of artistic value with culture, and some folks that knew about that culture had to make it and put it there. And the fact that this is a central village of the Cherokee, it's important to know that the Cherokee lived there for a long time, and then it was subsequently excavated by professional archaeologists and found to contain these twin earth lodges. So, I mean, it just all wraps up into a very interesting story that that shows the importance of the site.
Were there, I was kind of trying to lead you with that question, to be honest. Were there, because I'm not super familiar with this, but I believe I've seen some things about potentially animals of African origin being found in these figurines that were found there, like elephants possibly, or potentially even woolly mammoths, which would indicate very old. So either potentially, old world being brought over, or from pre-Ice Age. Am I getting mixed up here, or is that accurate?
Well, no, that's true. I mean, there were figurines. Some of them look like mastodons. There's 4 mastodon figurines. Either they're mastodons or they're elephants in this cache. There's also a lot of sculptures of bears, and some of them look like cave bears, ancient, very large prehistoric bears. I can kind of show it, what I'm looking at here. If I could share my screen.
Yep, here, just a second. There you go.
Okay.
You're still on the slideshow, though, I believe. So.
Okay. Here, I'll stop the slideshow and present my screen here.
But yeah, I mean, when it comes to diffusion, that, in my experience, is one of the most untouchable subjects. That is something that would give them a reason to try and dismiss these as a hoax, for sure. If this is potential diffusion evidence, they really don't seem to like that in the archaeological community.
Yeah, and one of the important artifacts found at the site, it looks like a rhinoceros, like a white rhino from South Africa. And
yes, it absolutely does.
A single horn on the front, and I mean the tail curved up, and so it has a really strong resemblance to a rhinoceros. And so, I mean, how to explain that? The one possibility that wouldn't be prehistoric would be that maybe these were from African American slaves that lived with the Cherokee, and during the entire European early occupation, slaves lived with the Cherokee and Creek in this area, and they may have been fabricating these during that time. So it's quite possible that these, in fact, are from the slaves living in North Carolina, and that they made them there, and they may have made them to show these animals that they were familiar with from Africa when they were brought over as slaves.
Right. But even if that were the case, that these still wouldn't be a hoax. Right.
Right. It still wouldn't be a hoax, at all. I mean, that's right. Still an important part of American history and early American history. The slave living with Native Americans is a well-known part of history. And I mean, it's not talked about very much, but it's true that it happened. And in fact, that they lived there for from the 1600s all the way through, even the Civil War.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of proboscideans, that would include the elephants and the mastodons and the bears. We can include, the bears are not proboscideans, of course. We could include them in America. But if you have this wave of people that are brought into the Americas, and they get to this site and they see that they have this massive collection, because we're talking about an enormous number of figurines, right, Vincent, from what I understood. And they see this and they say, okay, describe your animal then. And then they create the rhinoceros that obviously we wouldn't find in the United States. So you have this connection of what it was, adapting to what these newcomers and their description of their own animals. At least that's how I see this. I don't see them all as coming from other parts, but I think that there were introductions from these newcomers into this place. Because they see the other animals, it's just a normal reaction to say, oh, we also have funny animals. Oh, describe them to me. And then they fabricate the animal more or less according to the description that is being given. So.
Right, like I have on my screen a picture of a frog in a bowl. And I mean, this frog has a dark patch on the top of its head. And we know now that even the hokum from Arizona would use these toads, and they would use them in ceremonies of hallucination. They would take something like a bone awl and rub it on the toad to get a hallucinogenic chemical off the toad. So this was one of the cache artifacts from the site, and it's just very similar to the hokum or the artifacts you'd see in Arizona that showed a toad in a bowl.
Wow. Okay, so they've been licking toads for a long time in America.
Yeah, and I mean, there's a lot of just very diverse iconography and symbolism on these figurines. Some of them, like this one, it's a tablet. It has a figure on both sides.
That's a very interesting one.
And almost like a person riding a horse or a deer, sitting on the deer on one side. And you can see on the other side someone that looks like they have a serpent necklace and some holding a banner or a tablet or something in their hand, and then this cross-hatching symbol is very prevalent on a lot of the artifacts.
It looks to have a beard as well there.
Yes.
Seems he clearly has a beard. That artifact specifically is, somewhat reminiscent of like the Michigan relics a bit. It's clearly different, but I don't know. It gives me kind of similar. Seems to have some vague similarities.
I'm ignorant in this. Native Americans don't have beards, do they?
Not typically.
Okay, because I don't know. I really don't know. So I'm
not
just
typically.
Asking. Yeah. Okay.
Right, and let's see. I'll show another one here. This one in particular is the cave bear, and it's got figurines on all four sides, and this cedar type of image on the side with branching cedar figurine or engraving. Richard, you mentioned the importance of cedar earlier in native ceremonies. Can you elaborate on that?
I think he's left himself muted.
Oh,
I
Richard,
can't. Yeah, he has to unmute himself. I can't unmute him.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. I was preparing the video to present to you guys.
Okay.
Can you repeat the question, please?
About the importance of cedar, the cedar branch engravings, and
well, this. Let me see the figurine that you're showing. So the image that you showed me, I see that in every face of the figurine there were different types of botanical samples. So my question is, are these botanical samples presented with the animals representative of their environment? And if so, could we identify that environment and then justify their presence on a determined area, right? So we know when those animals were there because environments are keeping changing. So we can also use that to try. It's a long shot, but you can also use that to try and sample the dates of where those animals or their botanical samples would be present in that area. You see? So, and you showed me very different types of leaves, and those leaves can be easily identified and showed if they are present in the area of Mount Pisgah or not. So that would give us an idea. In terms of representation of the cedar is one of the trees that the indigenous peoples hold dear. So, inclusive, I think that some of their artifacts, in terms of I don't know how to say it, but they had ways to weave the bark or the wood itself to create their own things like baskets or any other subject. So it's included in their traditions. But my point when I talk to you about I'm sorry for the noise. When I talk to you about the leaves is exactly because we can use the leaves and see if they are represented in the environment and what epoch are they existent in the area, and therefore we can make a round date to where those animals were present with that kind of botanical samples. That was my point in that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
And so if we can continue on from the slideshow from the last slide.
Sure.
So the goal was to use this thermoluminescence to determine the age date. And like I said, we received 2 of the thermoluminescence tests back that showed that they were 100 years before the excavation. So the goal, since these are from excavated in 1880, that's dating from 1780 to 1880. The others, unfortunately, didn't result in any date, and they said there was not enough quartz present. So our initial hypothesis was that these would be much earlier, possibly, but of course we didn't know until we got these results back. And so there was not enough quartz in 8 of the samples. The time frame result took 8 weeks to get the results back. Usability is that the 2 of them said less than 100 years or within the 100 years. And the Virginia conservator said, well, less than 100 years could be really within a 1,000-year window. I mean, because they said thermoluminescence looks at a 1,000-year period. So, I mean, it's just it's a difficult thing to say, but they said it could be basically the same as 150 or 1,000 years. And
that can all be affected by fires and, the building burnt down and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
So the artifacts could predate that and then be reset by this environmental event when it heated up the material.
Yeah, but that's such a vague answer. So first of all, they say they are very recent, and then they say to you that very recent can mean 1,000 years old. It doesn't make any sense.
That is how these testing methods work. And carbon has a smaller window, but pretty much all of these dating methods often have very large windows. And, when you actually look at the raw data for these tests, they always like to give you a very specific number. Here's the date. It was 1488 or whatever it was, right? But they have this window, like he's saying, where that could be 1,000 years earlier, 1,000 years later. Like they have these very broad windows, and the way they present the tests, I think, is very deceptive because it leads people into thinking that these tests are able to give you that hard, firm date the way that they present it, and that is just a guess from a very large window most of the time.
Well, the thing that I find it funny is that they didn't choose the 1,000-year mark. They chose the no date at all. So it's very recent. They could have said, well, we really don't know. There's no problem in saying, I don't know. It could be 1,000 years old, or it could be made yesterday. Our machines really cannot say, right? But that's not what you're told. You're told that they're funnies, and this is recent, and because the date give these results, they immediately consider it to be yesterday instead of 1,000 years old. That's what I find funny about that. There's no real interest in the academia to explore these things. They just want to keep to whatever it's said before and written.
Yes, adherence to the narrative. Yeah.
And so the historical place name connection is one of the things that we've learned from this. During the DeSoto Chronicles, they called it the village of Coverup. El Ku is a word meaning mixed race. This was desecrated and burned down. It had a description matching the relics that were found there at Mount Pisgah, Garden Creek Mound. And later we found that the village was called Canuga, or this was the village for the word. This was the word from Cherokee meaning meeting ground for many people, and it was destroyed in 1751. We know from historical records that this city contained a ball court as well. So there's some connection there that this may have been 2 periods of conquest. That each one had the letters CU, Ku, Coverup, and Canuga. The Cayuga Seneca is another interesting connection that may be related, but these were place names that were associated with these villages that were burnt down. And For a research overview, in 1883, so we know now the Smithsonian called it a fraud or modern intrusion. That then in the 1910 to 1915, the High Foundation at the Museum of the American Indian said this was the city of Cayuga, the gathering place for the meeting place of many people. And then the Cherokee study from 1965 to 1983, where Geoffrey Coe, they determined that it was identified as Mount Pisgah, and the Garden Creek Mound was identified there to have Cherokee origins. And they were researching carefully the early origins of the Cherokee tribe. The results of these were mostly summed up in a publication in the 80s. And at the end, I'll show you the name of that publication.
And then if I can, for just a second, and go back for just a minute. So here, you have 1883 to 1983, but even before that, you're highlighting here how De Soto described this village. And then when it was discovered later, it matched De Soto's description. In 1910, the city of Cayuga, which means gathering place or meeting place of many peoples, also seems to match De Soto's description, where he's describing mixed race individuals, mulattoes, African, Native, Spanish, and others, all right, in this place all the way back in 1540 before it was destroyed, by De Soto, I guess.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, please carry on.
So there's a long history of conquest and the occupation from the conquistadors all the way through European settlers that came to the site, and they burnt it down or tried to conquer it. And so we published the research of these. First, we asked if we could carbon date the artifacts. They said, no, there's no carbon. So we tried thermoluminescence, and we made laser scans. We published these in the Ancient American and received the age dates back. And so the timelines we know from Geoffrey Coe's work was that the site dates to an early estimate of 80,000 to 1450 at Mound 1, and Mound 2 was from 200 to 600 AD. And so our dates now we've found from thermoluminescence range from 1780 to 1880 or to current, and then the Pottery Bowl 1780 to 1880. So again, these may have been reset from a fire event. And the site figurines like the banner stone and the other figurines like the mastodon could be much earlier in origin, even predating the mound's origin.
Right.
But Vincent, is there any indication that after De Soto the place was rebuilt and reoccupied?
And well, the Cherokee lived there after De Soto. They rebuilt a village there, and this particular book called The Pisgah Phase, and well, Roy Dickens wrote about the Cherokee prehistory, so he's got a lot of detail on what happened after De Soto and how the Cherokee lived there.
And they have a tradition of creating figurines?
And they did, and there were other figurines found at the site, all scattered around the site and on the surface of the fields, and figurines were also documented in the De Soto chronicles as well.
And they are different, the new ones from the Cherokee, from the ones that are found and you are analyzing?
Yeah, are they distinct?
Well, they're all different. I mean, they made these unique figurines, and no two are exactly alike. I mean, but they had a lot of them were bears. They carved a lot of birds and bears, and even turtle effigies. Or
that's related to the clans, right? The
yeah.
turtle clan, the bird clan, the bear clan.
Okay. Yes, exactly. The clans were clearly represented in these figurines.
So that in itself proves that it was a gathering place, even after De Soto burned it. It kept to be a gathering place, because you only find them together when it's a place where these clans unite for some reason for some time, and they have this figurines to represent those meetings or to celebrate their own clans.
That's right. The clans and the totems and even the animism religion, I think, were important here, because a lot of times they were making these figurines and they're covering them with cross hatching, so that they're like combing them with very fine workmanship and all the fine comb lines on them that show cross hatching, shows that they were sacred relics, and oftentimes that has to do with the clan symbols or the totem of their group, their effigy of that group, which was like important to their family. They identified as that creature, like the otter clan, the bear clan, the eagle, or whatever it may be.
Thunderbird and so on.
Thunderbird as well, right? And there were Thunderbird effigies in abundance in this cache. And so
And
there were
the etching is constant from before and after DeSoto?
and it looked like the etching,
Cross-hatching.
the cross-hatching and etching reduced after DeSoto.
Hmm.
A lot of the later ones that had guns, I mean, some of these actually had, these figurines had guns on, and those were not cross-hatched, but the earlier ones were.
So that's
it's like,
a difference.
yeah, there was a big difference there. Like the
Okay.
later ones with guns and things, they didn't have cross-hatching anymore. And so it's no longer like a sacred depiction, but it lends credence or importance to the tribal history of the importance of cross-hatching being their totem or clan. And the cross-hatching was an Ojibwe symbol that represented a power projection of that group's family. And it was sort of like a family icon or emblem.
Okay.
Thank you.
So,
Okay.
So if you want me to present the video, I can.
yes,
present it.
please. That'd be great if you could present that.
Okay. I don't know if you have. Okay.
Click the present and pull it up, and I'll add it to the screen.
Okay.
And I don't know if this is part of your slideshow later, Vincent, but if not, I would like you to touch on your interactions with the museum and how certain things disappeared after you started asking questions about them, because I think that's a pretty interesting part of this story. Okay, got your video up. Hopefully we get the audio for it.
You know what? Oh, that's great. Oh, this one in particular is one of my most interesting, my favorites. This one is covered with cross hatching, and it's depicting a pipe. I mean, a central, like a water pipe, with 4 tribal members sitting around the water pipe, and the cross hatching is covering all sides of the figurines and the base.
I would call those rodent feet.
Yeah, they're rodent. Bull or
Capybara,
yeah. And
which
it has
it's
the tail.
been a very, very long time since those appeared in North Carolina. And this one, the edges are finished a little different. It's not crosshatched as much as it's just grooved.
Yeah. And it's tabular for sure.
Yep.
That the symbols that show a lot of the peace avocations were very different from the time when Native Americans were at war and there was a lot of fighting going on. Why would these depict peaceful situations instead of warlike?
Is this a different material? Or maybe just a different part of the material? Holes are poked in it. Are those buttonholes?
It looks like it.
It looks like buttonholes. Hard work. Meticulous work. That is very interesting. And the artifact is damaged right there, apparently. It's a happy face.
Yeah, smiling.
Buttonholes again. Rectilinear. It looks like it's got a buttonholes in a collar. Less happy face.
Yeah, very different
Yeah.
facial.
So headdress, no headdress. Both faces are looking generally, but
flowery or wavy lines.
might be serpentine. I'm not sure.
And then, yeah, some kind of branching tree-like object geese on either side back here. Comes through here,
Yep.
completely hollowed out. In the back, oh, look at the back. It's got a bird, like a robin almost, or
Again, in a chair.
yeah, a chair. Like
There's a sun symbol on the chest. The figure appears to be kneeling, actually. It's an interesting tail, whatever that is. It's not bear's tail. Doesn't look like beaver tail, exactly.
yeah, wow. It's got a bear on one side, and the other side, two people holding hands, with male and female figurine.
That could be intentional, actually. Looks like it was broken from the outside in.
Yeah, killed with three legs on there.
Yeah.
Wow.
I don't know that this is a bear. The form is all wrong for a bear.
Yeah, the form is a lot, and it's definitely bending its back quite a bit to eat that animal, whatever it is.
Is it this one? No. Is that 427?
Yeah, 427 is number 524. And the chairs are crosshatched as well. Oh, that definitely looks like a pipe.
Yep. I have no idea what that's supposed to represent.
See that crosshatching on the side?
But this is not a bear's tail.
No, definitely not. It's mugs. How many times have you seen mugs in archaeological context? Like never.
Not.
I've never seen them before either.
Yeah.
Then tripod legs.
And again, it's all carved stone. But that's a squirrel.
Squirrel, yeah. Squirrel on the side. I thought it might be a rhino.
Well, it might be a rhino.
Because like that might, but yeah, it kind of looks like a hog.
Curled up tail on the back. It's a hog.
Yeah.
What is that figure right there? I love the calligraphy on the labels.
Yeah.
It's one of the originals. Huh. Oh, there we go again. There we go.
Yeah,
again.
there's some.
Okay, so we don't necessarily know what type of stone exactly those are, but those are all stone artifacts, not pottery.
So the majority were steatite or soapstone, and
Okay.
the museum identified about 58 that were pottery. And
Gotcha.
so out of the original 2,500, there were 900 or so left that most of them were made of steatite. And steatite was an important commodity. It was often used on making pottery bowls and dates back 2,000 to 3,000 years ago across the eastern U.S. There were many studies done on steatite distribution, and there's several articles that focus on that and the importance of steatite in mound builder work as well.
Vincent, have you considered that, for instance, that bear that Rick Osmond was saying, that it was a very strange representation if it was a bear? Do you think it might represent something obtained from a vision? Because we know that they had these ceremonies and they could want to represent what they saw in the vision for their people into a piece, and he describes it to the artist, and the artist recreates and deforms the form according to what he saw in the vision. Do you think there is a possibility that some of these images we are not exactly seeing what they are because they might come from a psychotropic approach to what they represent?
We did have that frog from earlier.
That's a great possibility, right? The vision quest was an important part of native culture, and they may have carved these during a time when they were on a vision quest, and at the same time they may have tried to carve it from memory, and some of them they don't appear to be native animals that exist anymore, and so I don't think that they were just creating real life images of every one of the animals, but they did include some artistic interpretation as well.
Because you mentioned that there were times of war, and we see them holding hands. We see them together around a pipe. Uh, could it mean that there was visions of peace, or they were recreating or
Even
creating
the
physically?
animals
Yeah,
seemed to be, presented in like a peaceful way, if that makes sense. A lot of them were touching snouts.
together, exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And a lot of the animals and the peaceful scenes are important because it's a different time frame that we're looking at. I mean, like this was noticed by Man Valentine himself that this had to be from an earlier time before warring was such a big part of the culture. And Jeffrey Wilson put a note in the comments that there was one of them eating a dog eating a skull on a log. And this was something they found in Ohio at Scioto Mound, Scioto, Ohio, that or the Siap Mound that they found had a depiction of a bear eating a skull, or a dog eating a skull on a log. And there were several, in fact, depictions of dogs or bears eating skulls on logs in this collection as well. So there's a strong connection there. Jeffrey says that that's the best evidence that these artifacts aren't fake. And in fact, we tested one of them that had that, but it was one of the indeterminate results on the
Of
thermoluminescence.
course, of course. And I know very little of this, and Chris might know much more than I do. In terms of the Calcotia mines, Calcotia area, weren't they? We know specifically when they were invaded by other tribes or replaced by other tribes. We know exactly when those things happen, more or less, right? By the natives themselves, they know more or less how that happened. I don't know, Chris, if this is any connection with Astalan, if it is previous to that, if it has any connection to that invasion from the south, and the types of rituals that was being done, like the human sacrifice and the abolition of the human sacrifice, and the different perspectives under this problem. Because I see a lot of peace here. I see animals peace, and I see now the bears eating the skulls, and to me that's clearly a vision. They are seeing these things either as a premonition, or as the solution, or as what they have to tell to the people, that this has to stop, or those have to be stopped. Or I'm just trying to identify a position in time so we can focus on specific periods of history.
Well, it's beautiful. I don't know what to say to all that. I'll respond some way. But Vince, did you have a response to what Ricardo said, or Goob, or anything?
Yeah, like Jeffrey Wilson pointed out, the animals, the bears were like persons. I mean, they were animism. They believed in the animism, and so they may have been depicting these animals as themselves. I mean, they were like making a self-portrait, so not a real life depiction of an animal, but actually they were trying to depict themselves.
Or the other tribe that was trying to dominate them.
Right.
The bear eating the skull on the log would be the other tribe coming and destroying man, our civilization, our men.
And in the DeSoto Chronicles, it touched on it, and it said, hey, these were sculptures that the chiefs made of themselves. They actually represented each one a different chief at a different time in the past. And so it may have been like a long accumulation of the chief sculptures and their self-portraits, that they were actually creating these as a self-portrait. So that's one of the most interesting possibilities, that what we're seeing here is really the village of Kofitacheke, the tribal ancestor shrine, where they literally had an accumulation of all of their ancestors.
Like a position of power. Oakham, sorry, forgive me.
Thank you. So just, another place that comes to mind is Powers Bluff, Wisconsin. And this had over 300 different herbs, and this was where the medicine people were different people. You came and you got all your different stuff. You didn't have to go to 30 different places, and this was a peaceful place for all tribes that got together. And, and then they went in, and just the whites took it all. And then the people didn't realize they had to pay property taxes. So the last ones living there lost it. But these were sacred places to multiple tribes that got together. And that's clearly what it seems this place is. Follow the place names, follow the village towns. I mean, the name of the town, Vince, meeting ground for many people. I mean, are you kidding me?
It's exactly that. Right?
Can't be much clearer.
Yeah. Yeah. So Vince, I mean, anybody jump in, but just a lot to talk about and great job so far.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate it, and it's hopefully that it'll get its recognition and get additional study in the future. And the goal here is to learn, and so I think it's important we have a chance to share about it and learn about it.
Well, I'll just say a few things and then I'll let you continue, Vince, because I'm excited for the rest of your presentation. But these finds are not that unique. They are from just different finds around the country: Ica Stones, Burroughs Cave, Brewer's Cave, Bowers Cave, all sorts of places, multiple repositories, thousands of artifacts, gazelle tablets, the number of large hoard finds like this. So what the people are basically doing at the Valentine is their founder, the people raised all the money for the place, who dug the dig, who was a professional. He knew they're basically saying he was hoodwinked, and throwing, it's just crazy. So, just these finds are not that uncommon. I had an emotional response from Joseph because they can help us. The academics can help us and make contributions and share knowledge, and we can merge together and move science forward. But this separation is just has to stop. And I think it can stop before they all die. And I just, we can all work together to move forward. So that's all I have for right now. Thank you.
I definitely agree that the idea that this is a hoax seems very far-fetched to me. It's not, like you're saying, it's not entirely clear exactly what we're looking at. Could these be, some of these artifacts from slaves? Probably not, because of the cross-hatching that is associated with those more anomalous artifacts. But there are other explanations out there, but hoax doesn't really seem to be one of them. And it's crazy to me that that's the narrative that they've chosen to go with, because there's just no evidence for that. There's none at all.
And really, this does show very possibly, I'm so sorry, there's so much evidence of contact from all the countries overseas to here. It's just overwhelming, and all of the burials and million mounds and everywhere. But this is evidence of contact across the seas, possibly, Vince. I mean, jump anywhere in and just continue your speech. But that is, when Russ Burroughs found Burroughs Cave, he took them to a professor, and the professor said, "I know what these are. They were made by a 19th century cult who lived in a 19th century cult that lived in the area. And these 5,000 stones you have are all garbage." And he said, "You got to be kidding me. Like, this is not fake. Like, this is a real story." So it's contact overseas is the big problem. And obviously this is a problem for that. 2,500 artifacts, 2/3 are gone. It's one find of many.
Right, and like you touched on earlier, what has the museum done? And they've taken them off display, first of all, back in 2009, and they've been in a storage locker since then. They don't have any of them on display anymore, and they don't plan to. They've said that they're either folk art or fakes or forgeries, and so unfortunately, that's where they're at this point. Moving forward, I mean, we've asked them we had to get special permission just to test them, and then to not get the full results. It's like a drawer effect. Basically, they took the results and put it in the drawer. They don't want people to know. And
yeah, and there's going to be no more testing. Like we're not going to be allowed to fund more testing. I mean,
and if you weren't here presenting this, these would just fade away into nothingness. No one would ever see them or hear about them again because, like you're talking about the drawer effect, they'd get stuck in a drawer and they just disappear. So I'm really glad that you're, bringing this to people's attention.
Good work, Goob. Good work, buddy.
Yes, thank you. Thanks for having this show and having the opportunity to talk about it.
I think just the amount of figurines is enough to show that it's not a hoax, because the sheer number of different pieces that you documented and there are in the museum, and now they're removed from sight and all of that. But the sheer number of them show that no one would create that amount of pieces just to try and produce some hoax. Because if that was the case, we would see those pieces being sold to this and that, and they'll be appearing all over the place because he would be selling those pieces, and we don't see them. Right?
2,500 artifacts that are buried for 100+ years before getting discovered. No one ever took credit for them. No one ever made money off of it. No one ever gained a reputation from it.
That's right.
Where's the hoax coming?
There's no hoax in here. There's no hoax. It's just a finding that is not being looked at.
Right.
Right. And it's important to learn about it. Like Jeffrey said, the Smithsonian at the time were part of the American Eugenics Society, and it wasn't government policy to hide evidence, or it was government policy to hide evidence of advanced Native American societies. So archaeology itself, if they find treasure, they hide it. I mean, archaeology and treasure don't go together. They're not considered archaeological because they're treasure. It's a treasure trove that we're talking about here. And
unless it contributes to their narrative, of course. If it does, they show it immediately.
Yeah. Did you want to continue with the slides?
Well, I think that was about it. Let's see. I mean, we talked about the timelines and then the future goals. We said, hey, we wanted to age date the artifacts. Some possibilities are to determine what skeletal race that was from the excavation photo. The wooden box present, I mean, it would be interesting to determine where that came from. The excavators present in the picture would be great to determine who they were. And just continue to research the cultural significance, the symbolism. Like we said, the bears and the birds, all these different figurines, even marine life. I mean, the possibility that these are actually chiefs doing self-depictions of themselves and archiving them in the ancestor shrine is really interesting. And target audience would be, anyone in diffusion, interested in the fusion or NAGPRA. We want to share, and then also the learning of the 3D models. We'll have those posted after this presentation for anyone to look at. You can click on the link and look at the 3D models from all sides. And so again, thank you. These are some publications that you can research and look at with additional information about this. It is a real important part of history, and even Alice Wright has earned her doctorate degree in this site, and so she's currently teaching. I've reached out to Alice Wright several times about this, and she won't comment on it. Just completely a stone wall. It's like hitting the wall. You can't get any feedback from her about this. And I've called her, and but it's because of this knowledge that the Pisgah relics, they're like they can't talk about it. And it's.
Do you know if her position is that whether it's a hoax or real? Does she voice her opinion on that?
In her dissertation, that she said the Valentines were implicated in this hoax, but she doesn't really say anything else about it, and she just calls it a data point. So
interesting.
And sorry, Goop, just one question. Why weren't the layers dated? It was made too long ago in the 1800s. Is that because? Is that the reason?
I mean, later on they were dated. The mound itself was dated, and as you can see here, during the excavations from 1965 to 1980, it was excavated and it was determined to be woodland or Mississippian time frame. See, this is the depiction: middle woodland, Mississippian, or these are the components of Mound 1 and Mound 2 where these were found.
So for those that don't know, what dates did that mean?
That means 200 to 500 AD or 1000 AD to 1400 AD. So the mounds themselves and all around where these artifacts were found were scientifically dated and determined by Jeffrey Coe, who was a famous archaeologist. The time frame of the mounds is, in fact, Woodland and Mississippian time frame.
But you have the banner stone showing otherwise.
And the banner stone is the one thing that really shows that that it has earlier.
Right. So they go back at least 2,000 years, but there's evidence that this goes back potentially much further than 2,000 years.
Right, 8,000 BC time frame to begin the origins of the occupation there. I mean, this banner stone is critically important because it's it's an archaic artifact that's a well-known real type of artifact with it has a hole drilled through the center and it's a lunar crescent banner stone.
And what is the significance of the angle?
In the stone, this is the minimum lunar declination at midwinter. So it's basically a lunar standstill. It's a important angle that the moon only goes to that angle one time in every 18 years. So it has an angle in the stone that's actually at the minimum lunar declination at midwinter, representing the lunar standstill.
So this would be on top of a stick or a
yes.
Well, through the hole, and they would measure it from the ground and look at the angle to determine it.
Yes, it would have to have been hung from a stick or a pendant and a pole, right? And they would determine that lunar angle, and this was all part of archaeoastronomy and the knowledge that they gained from studying the stars and the moon. They knew the movement of the moon because it's got this angle built into the stone of the minimum lunar declination at midwinter.
Okay, and there is any mark on the banner stone where the angle is lower? So on the right, we see the first ball, the white ball.
It's got the mark. Yeah, the mark is actually in the banner stone itself. And so it's marked at that minimum lunar declination angle. And if you look on the scan, it shows that angle clearly marked on the banner stone.
I was just asking because people looking at home only see the white dot and say, well, that's random. Why it's there, right? But no, it has an actual mark that you can see in the 3D scan. Yeah.
Right. So it's like the representation of the moon at the minimum angle and it takes 18 years of study just to determine that. So they must have been, looking at this for a long time and studying it.
Thank you.
So you've had a lot of interaction with the museum, and like I said earlier, you've asked them some questions, and then some things have disappeared after those questions. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, one of the questions was where are the results? They said they were going to give us the results after 4 weeks, and they didn't. And so he said, well, where are they? And they said, well, they're going to go back to the authenticators and they're going to ask them some questions to try to understand the results of their of the testing. And they didn't share any of those results with us. So, I mean, they didn't share.
You were paying for these tests?
Right. We paid for the results, and they wouldn't share them, and they wouldn't share the questions that they asked. Then a month later, they came back and said, well, 8 of them we didn't get any results from. They were indeterminate, and after that, they said they talked to 2 scientists who told them that these couldn't be dated any further. There was no further testing allowed, and we're not going to reveal any more results. And that was it. I mean, that was basically their final conclusion was these are either folk art or hoaxes. And I asked them, well, what if they're from 1780 to 1880? Then that's not a hoax. That's a real time frame too. They wouldn't respond to that either.
Wow. So it's not common practice, right? To have all of this information hidden and not replied to you, and then the removal from scene and not giving the results, and then giving the results, but what they told you is that, well, that's inconclusive. In fact, they use a very particular expression, right, Vincent? I remember that they use an expression on the email to you that they were what? I can't remember the exact word, but I thought it was very funny for a scientist to use it. That is?
Yeah, they said
Nope.
Sorry.
Oh, you muted yourself, Vincent.
You're muted. You're muted, Vince.
Oh, sorry. They
Go
said
ahead, Vince.
they said that they wouldn't let us do any additional testing, and and they said no material testing would be permitted from that point on. They said the only data that's going to be revealed is any archival information. So any conclusions would have to be from archival data from this point forward.
Yeah,
Now-
but in the email, they use a particular word to say why they couldn't measure them. They weren't. It's not sympathetic. I don't remember the term that they used.
Oh, it was not enough quartz. I mean, they said the quartzite wasn't present, and it wasn't enough quartz in them, and they just gave a blanket statement saying not enough quartz present.
Yeah, I can't remember the word, but that's not what I was asking. I remember that in the email that you showed me, they use a word to say
Something
that why
dismissive.
yeah, completely. It's not scientific at all. I can't remember the word that they use right now.
Right.
But
And if these were a hoax, then testing, and you're the one paying for the testing. They're not, funding this. You are. So it's not like they have an obligation to preserve these things because they're a hoax. So you should be free to do whatever, any and all testing you want if that's their belief. Yet they're shutting down testing. That doesn't add up. And then, if I'm recalling correctly, there was another instance of you asking questions to them, and they removed some information that was previously publicly available after you started inquiring about this. Is that, am I remembering correctly?
The pictures I showed of the burial was deleted right after I asked them about it. The picture I showed of the excavation crew was also deleted after I asked them because they just disappeared from the site. They deleted that completely. So, archivally, I mean, that's important. Archival evidence that was covered up, completely deleted from their site. And
because someone was curious about it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's so disappointing that our institutions operate that way. I mean, it's so makes you sick in your stomach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty upsetting, but it doesn't seem to be a rare occurrence.
Well,
Right. I mean, it's unethical, and unfortunately, it's legal, like Ricardo said. I mean, but it's not what a curator should be doing. I mean, they shouldn't be deleting this archival evidence of an archaeological excavation. The site is now considered non-archaeological, and it's because it's a treasure trove here, and they don't want anybody to know about it, so they just deleted this info.
the word was insensitive. I went back to our communication.
Yes.
It was insensitive. So the pieces were insensitive, and they couldn't date them because of that.
Interesting.
Okay, so that does relate directly to NAGPRA then. If that's very interesting. Insensitive is the word that they used, and they're implying it's insensitive to the Native Americans, I'm assuming, would be the
insensitive to the tests.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So literally I got you. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, they were saying it's insensitive to testing, right?
Gotcha.
But it's this. The Smithsonian has none of their pieces in the collection. So the Smithsonian has no pieces in our collection. They're convinced that they're forgeries. What would change their mind? I mean, we've offered to pay, it's like this mixed race village of 2,500 artifacts, and it's not an archaeological site anymore. I mean,
right, that's true. We reached out to the Smithsonian and said, hey, do you have any evidence of this from your excavation crew? Do you have any of the artifacts that you found or supposedly said that were fake? And they said, no, they have nothing left in their record. There's zero evidence of the record that they had. I did find letters from their trip down there, and I got a copy of those. But other than written letters where they paid someone to fabricate new artifacts in 1883, they paid someone about $30, and because they couldn't find any of the originals to fabricate new ones, that was an act of falsification in itself. I mean, but other than that, they had none of the ones that they paid someone to fabricate or any other record of what they had done. And
that's a
so
clever
the
maneuver.
Smithsonian had artifact. I'm a little confused. Where does that come into this story? The Smithsonian paying people to fabricate these artifacts?
Yeah, that was in 1883. James Mooney went to the site and had someone fabricate artifacts that were supposedly Mount Pisgah artifacts. And because they couldn't find the originals, they wanted to debunk the mound builder myth. So they created these artifacts and said, hey, I have some now that I've paid someone to create. So therefore, since I have these new replicas, the old ones, the originals are not real either.
So the fact that we can create Roman vases today shows that Roman never existed. Is that it?
Right. That's basically the gist of it. They were falsifying evidence, fabricating new pieces to show that they could get things made, and they did that, and in fact used it as their reason for justifying their opinion.
So a story that I'm very interested in is the pre-dynastic vases, and what you just described happening in 1883 is exactly what they're doing today with the pre-dynastic vases. So I guess they're still up to the same tricks.
Yeah, history repeats itself, even in academic meanders. So
yeah, it's bad science. I mean, that's scientific misconduct to create a forgery or fabrication, and to try to make the other ones look like they're not real. That's what they were doing.
Right.
Sure. Look, while we still have people in the top echelons of archaeological findings and decisions that instead of being concerned with being wrong, because that's the work of a scientist, is to prove himself wrong and thus advanced, they only want to confirm themselves. And while we keep this policy of just confirming what is behind, it's very difficult because they hold all the cards. If they want to remove the pieces from existence, they will remove the pieces from existence. If they want to create false evidence, they will create false evidence because they have all the tools in their hands. So it makes very hard. I think the only thing we can actually do in this regard is to expose it as much as we can until they are forced to reevaluate and some new entities decide to, no, I want to look at that pieces. So please find them wherever they are and bring those pieces to me because I want to test them again. And that's the only chance that we have here. Of course, we can use the baskets. I think if we find some, we can use them to try and date something. I think that the bodies, if they are still in the bodies, the baskets, we can find some ornaments in them, see if they are using some kind of items on themselves that can be correlated to this epoch because they were found on the same layer. And I don't understand why in this case the layers are not being taken into consideration in regard to the artifacts, because I don't see a distinction. For instance, what was the layer of the banner stone, for instance? Do we know for a fact what the layer was?
We just know that it was found with the Mount Pisgah relics in that central chamber. So assuming that the central chamber had all these relics in there, 2,500 of them, it was like a cache, and they dug it in a pit in the center of the mountain, and they basically then picked up everything. So it was just part of this big cache.
Sure.
And I mean, if this site was occupied for 10,000 years or so, there's obviously could be carryovers, right? They're passing things down, and so you might find artifacts from a 10,000 year span all within the same layer potentially, if that's what these cultures were doing, was preserving these previous artifacts.
Right, it's possible that they collected it like at a later date. Then it may have been created and then found by the Cherokee and brought into the mound. And this was an earth lodge. It was a twin earth lodge. The important thing about that is the earth lodge was oriented north-south exactly. I mean, the central passageway between the two chambers was north and south in alignment. So they clearly did this intentionally. They built it that way from the beginning. And I mean, it's a significant sacred geometry that they used to make this. And I
True
mean,
north or magnetic north? Because magnetic north can be dated.
true north.
True north, okay.
Yes.
That's a feat in itself. How they know what is true north?
Right. I mean, you can see on the first map that I showed, it showed the north arrow, and this orientation is exactly aligned with the north arrow. I think they must have used the North Star. That's what my thought is. But I mean, it's oriented north, north facing exactly.
Yeah. Well, the North Star is also vague because we have Vega and then we have Polaris. So both of them will indicate at a certain point true north, right? So
yeah, see the north arrow there on the that one. It shows the north arrow, and the orientation of the passageway is north and south exactly.
I see. Yeah.
And I was just wondering if I thought Cherokee burials were east-west. I think the Bat Creek Stone head was east, which was weird to them. Forgive me if that's reversed or whatever, but a repository of multiple generations, multiple centuries, millennium, like held together in a place. There are multiple of these places around the country, burial, stuff like this. Repository, an ancient library, just all this stuff together, is one possibility of these 2,500 artifacts, but we're not going to be able to see all the pictures. There are hundreds of other pictures, I believe, right, Vince? But my of the artifacts that still exist. But my point is that it doesn't seem that the Cherokee view this site as a sacred spot to them. Obviously, their last holding was in Cherokee, North Carolina, where that band hid up in the hills and stuff, and the rest, I believe, went the east or west Trail of Tears. But it doesn't seem that they tremendously want, or at all, they want this site, which is the same as Powers Bluff, which was a meeting site. It was where tribes got together, so it was like the local tribes didn't want it. So the point is like, is this a this is possibly not anything to do with Cherokee is also a possibility. Why wouldn't they want it? So
and that's a good point. And one of the things that they wrote in the Cherokee chief in around 1830 wrote that we've cast away all our idols. The Europeans asked us to cast away our idols. We did so. And also that the land was taken without their permission. It wasn't transferred properly. So at that point, they don't want it back. I mean, it's like it wasn't properly transferred. It was taken and they cast it away. So it was no longer considered sacred. And once that happens, they're not going to go back to it. Unfortunately, it's just it's like a lost castaway site.
They would want those artifacts if they were theirs. I've heard that type of story before. They clearly don't. Although, do we for sure know the Cherokee's 100% ancient history? Are we 100% certain about that? But that's for another time. So,
right, and it's and also, I mean, it's a good point that Jeffrey Wilson said. Hey, that same structure at the mound was found in Siep and Harness Mound in Ross County, Ohio, and the Big Toko Mound in Tennessee. So, I mean, it's a geometry that was used in multiple Twin Earth Lodge mounds to be built like this across the country.
Isn't that Spiro, Oklahoma, Vince?
No, that's a different site. This is
no, but just a repository beyond the, but a twin mound or a multiple twin mound repository type thing. You'd have multiple libraries around.
Right. Well, that Siep Mound, Spiro Mound is another good example of a cache where they found massive quantities of sacred artifacts that were all accumulated there. And
they can be related to this site, or they
if
cannot?
That was visible, what was pulled out of Spiro, Oklahoma, that would, world history would not be the same. But they went in there and just stole everything for years and years, and it goes to the black markets all over the place, and it's lost to the winds. But this Pisgah collection could be had, and nobody wants it.
And Spiro had figurines too, human figurines that were on platforms like the big boy pipe. I mean, that's very similar to what you see here. A lot of the figurines were on platforms and similar depictions and things like that. So, I mean, they are comparable from Spyro to Mount Pisgah. And you know, like Jeffrey said, those mounds are dated to the middle woodland, 1000 to 580. I mean, it's the time frame of the Hopewell. Then when they were creating these twin earth lodges, and it was across the country when they were doing this. I mean, many mounds were like this.
But they attribute the Hopewell to all of Ohio, which is, what is that, the Shawnee now, or who gets all the artifacts there, Goob, in Ohio?
I couldn't tell you. Exactly.
But the Ohio is, you know, Hopewell, so that's a time period, and we don't know who they were, and we don't know who the Adena were. So I like that you know when these mounds were built, but the repository is another matter.
But it seems what we find is caches in
Yes.
centers of all of these different cultures that are seeded from the same root, right? So it seems that the country was not having one or two, but have multiple places where they gathered, probably in different times of the year, for their ceremonies.
Right. And it you know, Occam earlier was talking about the gathering place for medicine men, right? Where you gather all of the different medical supplies and techniques. And just from I'm not the most expert on this, but from my observations, that does seem to be what I see in ancient America. You know, you go back 2,000 years and you see these various different gathering points where you have broad swaths of cultures coming in, many different tribes coming in, and they seem to be dedicated to a singular purpose. You know, one gathering site is for religions, and you'll see different native religions there, or even, you know, potentially Hebrew religions there, and other cultures' religions. Same thing with like the medicines. You see this gathering of broad, you know, groups of tribes gathering and sharing their medical knowledge. Or here, you know, you have all of the animal effigies and things like that. And so, yeah, this could be another one of those such sites, I think.
Thank you. Cool.
And earlier there were some pictures of teacup looking vessels, like a vessel with a handle on it. And in fact, later I learned that there are examples like that found in mounds in Ocmulgee, which is near Macon, Georgia. So there are steatite teacups found in mounds, and that had this earth lodge structure. They weren't unique to Mount Pisgah site. I mean, so they have been found.
Do you know, were those teacups dated at the Ocmulgee Mound?
They didn't have a date on display, but the mound at Ocmulgee, I mean, that's 1000 AD to 1450 time frame. Right. But it's right in line with the same type of material and sculptural teacup. So, yeah, the early mounds did have these in use, and so I mean the 1450s time frame seems to be when the culture of the Pisgah culture ended, and that coincides with the early slave trade and European invasion.
Right. Yeah, but medieval Europe, from my knowledge, had very, very little examples of cups with handles. So I don't see how we can relate them to people going in the 1500s, because they wouldn't be using handles. It's just cups, no handles in them. So what do you know about the handles used in the Americas? And as a personal curiosity, what would they be drinking if there were representations of actual mugs on those cups? What do a cup symbolizes to be made into a figurine? You see, it's something has to have a significance. And if we find cups with a base, they are not going to be used as cups. They are symbolizing something that the cup represents, right? Like something that everyone drinks or everyone shares, but not that piece, because that piece has a stone base that makes it not practical for use. So do we find mugs like this without the base that were used for drinking something.
Yeah. And I mean, there are examples from Aztecs and Mayans that they had teacups. And the Chinese, I mean, are well known for teacups, drinking tea. And so it's possibly a something that was carried over from China.
Something that they've seen, yeah.
Something they've seen, right.
So China, to be China would have to be at least either 1000 BC, the first wave of exploration from the super ships, and then we have another one that around the 1100, 1200, with smaller ships, but still enormous compared to Portuguese caravels, for instance. So the ships that would accompany these mega ships would be larger than the Portuguese caravels. That's how big those. It's from the 1000 BC, the ships were equivalent in size to the largest passenger tourism ships that we have today on the ocean. That's how big they were. They were just enormous. Thousands of people on these ships. The second wave were slightly smaller, but they were perfectly capable of going either west or east and turn around and find the Americas without a trouble. So it's a strong possibility that they have seen them when they received them with the mugs and then represented the mugs as the symbol of union with other people. Or I'm just speculating, but I'm trying to figure it out, because from Europe you won't see handles. Even in royal items you won't see handles. It's just cups.
Yeah, and it's a good point.
As far as just a quick fun little fact about the Chinese potentially coming to America, the ships you're describing, they made longer treks than what it would have been to go from China to America. They made even longer voyages, so it's absolutely possible that they could have reached America, no question.
And there is a Chinese medallion that was found nearby in Asheville, North Carolina, by a metal detector back in around 1990, signifying the treasure voyage of a Chinese ship to North Carolina around the 1360. So
yes, that's also a hoax.
That's the Ming
it
Dynasty.
Was planted at future time. It was lost there.
All right, we'll say that.
Well, and now because of NAGPRA, legally, I believe that has to be a hoax. It either has to be a Native American artifact, anything that's pre-Columbian. It's not like explicitly written into the law, but with the way the law is written, there's an assumption that absolutely everything pre-Columbian is Native American, because absolutely everything that's pre-Columbian must now be assigned to a modern tribe. So even these Hopewell artifacts and things like that, those have to be assigned to a modern tribe now. And so that only leaves the option of, well, this belongs to Native Americans or it's a hoax. So that's like written into the federal law now, that diffusion and the possibility of exploring and discovering diffusion is illegal now, effectively.
Bring it on.
Yeah. Well, the confirmation of transatlantic travel, I think, will change that, because it's becoming irrefutable at this point. So the evidence that were found in the Azores Island show Carthage anchors, hundreds of them, not to say thousands of them, in Ilha Terceira alone, and that alone proves transoceanic travel between the Strait of Gibraltar and the Azores, right in the middle of the Atlantic. So it's just another leap into the Americas. So and you have megaliths from the Neolithic, at very least the Neolithic, on the Terceira Island, which means that these crossings were not happening 1,000 years ago. These crossings were happening 4, 5, 6,000 years ago. So they will have to change it, because the evidence exists and they cannot be denied. They cannot just obliterate a dolmen that weighs 2,000 tons like they obliterate a figurine. They cannot deny it. So
let's hope so. They've been quite effective at obliterating a lot of things. So hopefully you're right.
Well,
Yeah.
Big orthostats are not as easy to dismiss as figurines. Even if they are 2,500 of them, 2,500 of them. So I think the number should be repeated.
Are there any final thoughts? Is there anything you've left out, or anything you want to add, or a summary or conclusion, or anything? Have we covered things pretty thoroughly, or is there still more to this?
Well, it's been great talking to everybody, and I mean, I hope that this has opened up the door for research in the future, and that people will look at this and be interested or ask more questions and continue to learn about it, and that it won't be put in the drawer, and eventually, hopefully, it'll lead to a lot of study in the future and just learning about the culture in the past.
Absolutely. Yeah. And thank you for bringing this to people's attention, because without you, this would just fade away and disappear, and no one would know anything about the largest cache of artifacts on the East Coast would just fade into nothingness. So thank you.
Thanks, Goob. Good work.
Yeah.
Good. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us, everyone. And I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Well, until next time.
Thank you.
Yeah, next time. We got a lot more.
All right. Adios. And yeah, I think we might in the future do this again if as things develop. So
Very good, Goob. Very good.
Thank you.
All right. Peace out, fellas.
Right.
Bye.